Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 3, Episode 14, called Heart of Stone. This episode aired February 6th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about the previous podcast, Life Support?
No, it was perfect.
Yeah, I think it was pretty close to perfect. It was kind of a bummer to lose Kira's boyfriend, but it's dangerous in space.
Kira does not have a lot of luck. Things go badly for her, and now they killed her boyfriend.
Yeah, I mean, I guess she had him for a while, which is surprising that she had him, around for more than an episode or two. But now he's gone. Although, in Star Trek, things come back, so who knows?
Oh.
She could go to the mirror universe and bump into him.
Oh.
A mirror Bareil would be interesting.
Yeah. Evil Bareil.
That would be fascinating. That probably won't happen.
You know what?
What?
The mirror Bareil might be just like Kai Wynn.
And then the mirror Kai Wynn would be like Bareil.
Yes.
Maybe she'd go to the mirror universe and fall in love with Kai Wynn. And the mirror version of herself is in love with her, so it's all over the place.
That would be very confusing.
Yeah, it's chaos. All right, well, I know you have 11 pages of notes, and I have a lot of notes on this one, so we probably should get started.
Yeah, we better get going.
All right, in the cold open, Kira and Odo are on a shuttle coming back from a Bajoran colony near the Cardassian border. Odo has his arms crossed and is in a cranky mood. Kira keeps asking him if he's upset, and finally he says when the governor of the colony invited them to dinner, she said no for both of them without asking his opinion. She's surprised that he cares since he doesn't eat and he doesn't like to socialize, but Odo just wants to have agency over his own life. She apologizes in a very non-apologetic tone.
No. This is that thing you point out, people basically treating Odo badly. Why wouldn't you ask him? He's your friend and he's part of your team. Why would you exclude him from that or make assumptions for him? Yeah,
especially when a couple episodes ago, Kira learned how important it was to him to have his own quarters. And she seemed to be sympathetic to that and maybe empathetic to his situation. And then she's forgotten all of that. I did make a note that this is almost where that episodic thing kind of lets her down.
Right.
Because she did learn something a few episodes ago in The Abandoned. And now it's like that lesson is gone and we're back to just telling Odo what to do or not caring about his feelings. And he's so emotional. It drives me crazy when nobody cares about his feelings.
Right. And also in the episode where he met the founders, how caring she was about him.
Yeah, she's a little up and down. I wonder if it's just different writers or something for different episodes, or if it is that episodic thing of, we reset and keep going. But
I think it's very much that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a bummer. And it's also a bummer that she seems to be over Bareil already after one episode and not even mentioned.
And how rude she is in the non-apology.
She mocks him. Well, I have a little more to say about this when we get to the overanalysis section, actually.
Okay, keep going.
Well, anyway, after this, Kira picks up a transmission from a nearby Lysepian supply ship that's under attack from a Maquis interceptor. The Lysepian ship didn't sustain any serious damage from this attack before the Maquis got away, but Kira still decides to chase after the Maquis ship.
Of course she is.
But it seems so weird since it didn't do any damage and it's just one person on a ship. Why would you chase after it?
It's Kira. She's not giving up the quarry.
I guess.
My advice for the guy on that ship, start running.
I think that's pretty good advice. And the other problem I had with this scene is how flat her hair is. I don't like the flat hair version of Kira. Well, we cue the theme song.
Love the opening credits.
When we come back from the credits, they're closing in on the Maquis ship, but it manages to enter the Badlands, and Odo loses the ship temporarily in a plasma field, but finds it again just as it disappears into the atmosphere of a moon orbiting a gas giant. They can't tell if the ship landed or crashed on the moon because the moon's atmosphere is jamming their sensors. Of course.
Isn't this a red flag by now?
Yeah, and Kira just decides, let's land and see what happens.
You're going in anyway.
What was funny to me here was Kira showed this moment of concern that the ship had crashed and something had happened to the Maquis, but 2 seconds ago she didn't give a crap about Odo. It was just so strange.
Yeah, it's an inconsistency in her writing, yes.
Well, now we go to the station and we're in ops. Nog has come to see Sisko on an urgent matter. Nog thanks Sisko for seeing him and awkwardly extends his hand like I guess he's seen humans do.
Yeah.
And Sisko shakes it to not leave him hanging with his hand out, but it was pretty funny.
Nog is being very polite.
He is.
I think that's classic Ferengi sucking up.
Yeah. Yeah, he's totally sucking up. And also, he's got this little bag of latinum for Sisko, and he offers it as a gift. He recently completed the Ferengi attainment ceremony, so he's officially an adult. And according to Ferengi bylaws, upon reaching adulthood, a Ferengi must purchase an apprenticeship from a suitable role model, and he has chosen Sisko. Congratulations, Commander Sisko. Nog says he wants to be the first Ferengi in Starfleet, and he's all ready for his uniform.
Sisko has this quietly bemused look on his face during this whole thing.
Yeah, it's like he's waiting for the punchline.
And I like how Nog is constantly extending his hand to try and shake his hand.
Throughout the whole episode.
Yeah, I feel this is like kind of typical of the Ferengi, well, certainly of Nog. And this is something he's probably picked up that it's a human trait. So he's doing it all the time.
Right. It's almost like a child imitating something that they see an adult doing.
Exactly, right.
And so they just do it. And it's not always in the right situation. They just know to mimic it.
And the other thing is, I think he superimposes Ferengi culture into everything in the outside world. He wants to join Starfleet. Well, how you would do that in Ferengi society is pay the bribe, get your uniform, suck up to the senior officer.
And you're in.
And you're in. It's how he understands the world.
Right. Since the beginning of the show, I do think he has been pretty respectful of Sisko. He doesn't always know what to do. He doesn't always know the right thing to say or to do. But I think he's always looked up to him. And when somebody would do something that would make him look bad in the eyes of Sisko, he would get mad.
Yeah.
You know, like in the camping episode, right? He got really mad at Quark because he was wrecking the whole thing for him. And he was trying so hard to show Sisko that he was a good friend to Jake and that they could have this relationship. And so I don't know, somehow in here, they've been kind of hinting all along that Sisko was important to him.
Yeah.
You know, in some way. I don't know that you would say that he was a role model, but there was just something about Sisko that he looked up to.
I also find it odd that Sisko, who has studied the rules of acquisition, was unaware about the whole apprenticeship part of their culture.
I don't know if he was totally unaware of it, but he was taken aback by the situation for sure.
Oh, okay. I didn't look at it like that. But yeah, maybe that was just surprising that he would have wanted to apprentice with himself rather than another Ferengi or even Quark or someone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think this is very out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Well, Sisko has to explain to him that it's not quite that easy, and the only way in is through the academy. And as a non-Federation citizen, he'll need a letter of reference from a command-level officer before he can even take the entrance exam. And through this conversation, the two of them are like pushing that bag of latinum back and forth to each other. It was really cute. When Nog insists that Sisko writes this letter for him, Sisko finally kind of gives in and says he'll think about it. And then Nog pushes that latinum bag back in his direction. And then he does the awkward handshake again one more time.
Right.
He says he knows Sisko will make the right decision. Sisko tries to get him to take the latinum with him, but he's like, no, you keep it and consider it a token of his appreciation. At first I thought, would Starfleet maybe frown on this, on a bribe to write a letter of reference? But then I was like, I don't know, you're just writing a letter. He still would have to take the exam and qualify to get in. And also, if money's not supposed to mean anything in the Federation, then who would care?
I would assume Sisko would just give it back, ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Or if you don't need money, what do you do with it?
And the closing of that scene, the way Sisko's mood has changed to, oh, great, I have to deal with this now.
Yeah, now I have to deal with this.
Avery brings so much life to that character.
He definitely does. And I know we said, this was a couple episodes back, something about how Sisko just loves children.
Yeah.
And what he doesn't love, though, is Nog. I think he has viewed Nog as just really problematic. And now Nog's not a kid anymore, I guess. And now he's like, oh, you know, now he's even a bigger problem.
Well, I think you're still leading on from some of Sisko's own personal biases about the Ferengi.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. We go back to the moon and we're crawling through some caves looking for our Maquis fugitive. They found the crashed ship and assumed that the guy ran into this cave for cover. Tricorders aren't working, of course, because of the atmospheric ionization of the moon. And because there are all these ongoing earthquakes, Kira proposes that they split up and meet back in 20 minutes. If they don't find the fugitive by then, they'll get the heck out of there.
Awesome. We haven't been in caves for ages. This means there's something important going to happen.
Only important things happen in caves.
Exactly.
So off they go in their separate directions, but almost immediately Kira calls saying she's trapped and needs some help. Odo runs back towards Kira and finds her with her foot stuck in some kind of a crystal that starts spreading up her leg. and dramatic music plays us into the ad break.
This is why you don't split up in an unstable cave system.
Such a terrible idea to split up.
Yeah. When your tricorders don't work.
I mean, what's the worst that could happen? You don't find the guy? Who cares? You found his ship. You could take his ship.
Right.
Or you could just go back up into orbit and wait for him to take off.
I wonder if Kira's now more concerned about the peace treaty with the Cardassians and the Maquis screwing that up.
Yeah, maybe. We don't really explain why we chase after one guy and put ourselves into harm's way because of one person.
That's a good point.
Well, after the ad, Odo tries smashing the crystal with a rock, but that makes no difference. Kira, of course, shoots the crystal with her phaser, but that just makes it grow even bigger.
Oh, she's back to shooting things. I love this.
Odo tries calling the shuttle to beam them out, but that doesn't work. He says he's going to head back to the shuttle and try to transport her from there. He hesitates, worrying about leaving her alone, but she says she'll be fine. She makes a little joke saying she promises not to go anywhere. She
also makes a comment when we first see her foot trapped about not letting Bashir test his medical skills. Well, if your foot's trapped and you're in a dangerous cave system, I've seen the movie 127 Hours. Chop the foot off, go back, get a replacement grown. I think they can grow some replacement limbs.
Yeah.
In the voyage home, and I've said this before, McCoy gave a woman a pill and she grew a new kidney. Surely they have that kind of technology for growing a new foot for a Bajoran.
I don't dispute it, though I think it happened too fast. I think it went up the leg too fast, and then they didn't even seem to consider that option. It was only just on her foot for a very short amount of time. And then it was up her leg really fast.
Yeah.
Then up to her waist, and then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But also there are reasons why maybe good decisions weren't made here, which we will get to. But we're not there yet. No spoilers. Okay. We go back to the station and Ram and Nog are trying to fix the replicators in the bar. When Quark complains about how long it's taking, Nog points out that his father had warned Quark about the replicators needing maintenance, and he hadn't done anything. Ram interrupts Nog and says it's his own fault because he didn't explain it well enough. And Quark says, of course it's your fault. Everything that goes wrong here is your fault. It's in your contract. And then he says any losses will come out of Ram's paycheck. Ram says, of course, brother, and runs off to get some more replacement parts. And Nog sighs at this, as this is obviously something very common that he has to witness.
That sounds about right for a Ferengi contract. Remember, Rule 110, exploitation begins at home.
Right. Then Jake comes in at this moment and tells Nog that his joke of wanting to join Starfleet was pretty funny. Nog is worried that Jake has ruined his chances by telling his dad it was a joke, but he wasn't kidding. He intends to join Starfleet. When Jake asks, Nog won't tell Jake his reasons for wanting to join Starfleet.
Nog says, it's not a secret, I just don't want to talk about it. Wouldn't that be the definition of a secret?
Well, it's not necessarily secret, it's just private.
And Jake's wearing some weird floral outfit.
My notes say he's still wearing his ugly silk pajamas, but Nog has upgraded. He's got fancier clothes.
Oh, yeah.
He's wearing a very fitted suit with a red and green jacket over a shiny red shirt. And also that visor or whatever the thing is on the back of his head matches his new jacket.
I noticed that when he went in to see Sisko, he was very spruced up.
Yeah.
Do you think that's part of becoming a Ferengi adult, that their fashion sense changes? Or was he just trying to look smart for Sisko?
My assumption is he got to upgrade his clothes because now he's an adult.
Good take.
You can only shop in the kids department.
Oh, gotcha.
Until you're an adult, and then you can go to Garrick's and have a suit tailored for you.
That's pretty good suit.
Yeah, it's nice. It might also just be that now that he's an adult, he wants people to take him more seriously, so he stops wearing the sort of loose, baggy, sloppy clothes of a kid and tries to look more professional.
Right. That would also, I would see, as part of Ferengi culture. Dress the part.
Yeah, could be that. We go back to the moon, and Odo is trying to beam Kira out of the cave from the shuttle, but the computer is unable to comply because of the interference.
Majel Roddenberry is not being very helpful here.
I know, it's really funny to see him interacting with Majel's voice when it's not Loaxana, and you don't say anything about it. It's like, gee, you sound a lot like my friend Loaxana.
Yeah.
He tries to send out an SOS to the station, but in the end, that doesn't work either. So he launches a probe that can clear the atmosphere and then send for help. The computer launches the probe, but it says it will take 2 days for the signal to reach the station.
This is another one of those Star Trek science areas, which is kind of funny. Sisko gets communications from Starfleet immediately and interacts with them. And here, Odo's trying to talk to Deep Space Nine, and it's 2 days before they get a message.
Yeah, is it because for some stupid reason, the probes that would be sending out emergency SOSs, they don't talk to any of the relays or something? I mean, come on. It sounded like he could have gotten into the shuttle and flown to Deep Space Nine faster. Because he said later that he intends to be back there by tomorrow night. So why didn't he just jump in and go for help? He would have had it faster.
That's a really good take, yeah.
Or get up there and at least get close enough that you can give them a message and then get back. But yeah, that is a very loosey-goosey Star Trek thing of how long things take.
You know, I didn't think about that with the shuttle.
Yeah.
But he makes that reference about the home tomorrow night.
Mm-hmm. Odo is heading back into the caves now when he hears phaser fire. He runs in to find Kira holding her phaser. She says the Maquis dude just came out of one of the tunnels and fired badly at her. He missed, and then she missed him. He sees the phaser fire on the wall behind her. He looks very worried, saying he didn't miss by much. And here, the fact that they didn't show this fugitive person, this is very suspicious by now. You're already going, wait a minute, what is going on? We should have seen the guy.
Well, the crystal's definitely growing. It's now covering her whole leg and the other foot.
Yep, it's not looking good. Back on the station, Sisko and Bashir are discussing an ensign who is budding, which apparently means he's pregnant and with twins. This makes Sisko so happy. He's always about the kids.
He really is.
I realized somewhere along the way here that this is another way he's the exact opposite of Picard, who is very uncomfortable around children.
Yeah.
Sisko would have done very well on a ship full of families. Instead, he ends up here on this station, but I think how much he likes kids, he would have enjoyed that. Well, then they talk about presents for a baby shower, and it's all very lighthearted. But when they part, Sisko walks by Quarks, and Nog comes running out to ask if he's made up his mind about the letter. He says he doesn't think of Nog as a viable candidate for the Academy. Nog asks if it's because he's a Ferengi, but Sisko says his reputation on the station isn't great, and his grades in school are mediocre at best. He's also had a lot of run-ins with Constable Odo. Nog says he admits he's made mistakes, but he just needs a chance. And then he goes in for another handshake, but the scene ends without them shaking hands.
Yeah, he does kind of plead with Sisko there.
He does, but he doesn't give any detail. He's just like, I just need a chance.
Do you think Sisko is making an excuse there when Nog says, it's because I'm a Ferengi, and Sisko replies, not at all?
Well,
I'm thinking of, there's so many negatives to the Ferengi culture. Sisko's well aware of them. Do you think he was just saying that?
Well, all of those things that he said are true.
Yeah.
He doesn't do well in school. He has had lots of run-ins with Odo. He does have a bad reputation on the station. The first time he met him, he was stealing something.
Yeah.
So I feel like he could have added on to it by saying, oh, and here are the struggles that a Ferengi would have. But I wonder here if Sisko was holding on to that lesson he said that he had learned, that maybe human and Ferengi could be friends or they could get along.
Right.
And so maybe he is trying to push that down or say, hey, maybe it is possible. If Jake and a Ferengi can be best friends, maybe there is some hope that a Ferengi could get into Starfleet. And also, who is Sisko to stop an entire race from going into Starfleet?
So he really is just referring to Nog.
The specific issue in front of him, right? Yeah. These are all the problems I see with you.
Right. Right.
It's kind of a good leadership way to deal with it. It's like, I'm just being honest. These are the problems I see.
Okay, that's a good point. Because at the end of the day, they let the Trill into the Federation and Starfleet, and they're culturally sociopaths.
Well, sure. Well, in the next scene, Dax comes into Sisko's office, and Sisko tells her that he wants Nog to do a complete inventory of Cargo Bay 12. He tells her about Nog's request for a Starfleet recommendation, and he says he doesn't want to make up his mind without giving him a chance to prove himself. She's very surprised, and she proposes some crew members to assist him, but Sisko says nope, no help, and no interference.
So Sisko is testing him. Nice.
Well, I think that's a wise thing to do. It's like, prove your resolve. If I'm going to go out on a limb for you, I want you to prove your resolve, right? I think that's actually a pretty good technique. Kira is now up to her waist in this expanding crystal. Odo is frustrated that the tricorders don't work because he'd like to analyze the material.
Should have cut off her foot.
He's also frustrated that nothing works here, and he finds it a bit suspicious that the fugitive chose this location to hide. He wonders if maybe he trapped them here on purpose.
Very convenient, don't you think?
Starting to think.
He has such a suspicious mind.
He does. Kira, at this point, she's a bit teary, and she thinks that she's maybe only got around 12 hours before the crystal kills her. Then another earthquake hits, which is also emphasizing the urgency.
Yep.
Odo says he's going to find a way to shatter the crystal. He has this idea from something he read in the criminal activity report about a high-frequency ultrasonic generator. He thinks he can use one to create a vibration on the right frequency and shatter the crystal. He runs off to the runabout to get what he needs.
So Narsicon raiders use that to steal things from a museum. If they're not stabbing Starfleet officers, they're robbing museums.
That's true. That was the one that stabbed Picard.
Yep.
I forgot about that. This scene here where Kira is all teary, this is what convinced me that this indeed was not Kira.
Really? You got it already?
Yeah. When she was crying, I'm like, seriously? We have seen her in way worse situations. In the civil defense episode, they had 5 minutes to live. Nobody was crying.
Yeah.
That absolutely did not fit her character.
Fascinating.
Back on the station, Dax shows Nog the room that he needs to inventory. Doesn't look like that much, honestly, but anyway, apparently it's a big cargo bay that we can't see all of.
It looks like that there's about a dozen things in there. It shouldn't take more than an hour.
I just paused the screen and could count them.
Yeah.
They could have tried a little harder on that. But Nog is a little surprised that he has to do the whole cargo bay by himself. Sisko would like the report by tomorrow morning, but Nog says he'll have it done tonight. He's very keen, and he says he wants to get started.
Wow, that is super keen.
Yeah, he seems quite determined as she hands him the data pad and leaves.
What would be perfect in the closing of this scene would be to have Nog opening the back door of the cargo bay and Quark reversing up like a white cargo van.
Beep, 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 beep.
Exactly.
We go back to the cave, and Odo's contraption is cycling through harmonic frequencies while the crystal is now up to Kira's chest. Also, aren't we a little suspicious by now that she's trapped inside the only piece of crystal in the cave that's doing this?
Well, that's probably just another thing that's making Odo suspicious about exactly what's happening here.
Yeah. It's also possible that it was a trap left by the fugitive.
Ooh, nasty.
Yeah, that would be a pretty nasty trap. Well, he tells her not to worry. He fully intends to be back at the station by tomorrow night because he has an appointment with Chief O'Brien to go kayaking in the holosuite. Kira is surprised, but Odo says he enjoys it and they've done it before. Miles sings sea shanties to establish a smooth paddling rhythm. I thought that was really cute, especially with the rise of the sea shanty right now on YouTube. But what was really funny was he said that Miles sings a sea shanty called Louie Louie. That's his favorite one. That was great. I'd like to see that.
I'm sure that's a little embellishment by Miles about exactly what's classed as a sea shanty.
I would think so. That would be a fun episode to see the two of them kayaking. I would enjoy that.
Yeah. It also, I think, shows more of Odo expanding his horizons since meeting the founders.
Oh, totally agree.
Yeah. And also, Miles is treating him like a crewmate, like a colleague, or even a friend.
Like a friend, exactly. Yeah. And Kira is really surprised by this whole thing and kind of keeps poking at why he would do this. And Odo says something about, well, he asked me and I was free. And so I did it. And now we've done it a bunch of times. You know, it was just really interesting. But also, I think part of him is looking at it as a study.
Yeah.
You know, because he talks about how Miles has had that program for a long time and that it was a very difficult program and he continues to hurt himself doing it, but he won't stop because he loves it. And then he says that he's noticed that humanoids have a hard time giving up things they love so much, no matter how much pain they cause. That was kind of the thing he'd learned.
In some ways, I feel this was very strange coming from Odo, because Odo himself has emotions. He struggled with being alone. It was hard for him after he found his people to break with them. He likes order and things to run smoothly and gets upset when they aren't.
Yeah.
Like when Starfleet replaced him with the invisible security guy. Remember the one we never see anymore?
Snodgrass.
Oh, that's what you called him, wasn't it?
That's what I like to call him, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember his name.
So you could almost say the same thing about him. You too, Odo. You don't like it when things change. Giving up things that you like.
I would say there's a slight lesson in this, that the person who is questioning him thinks that. This doesn't make any sense to that person, whoever that person is. But Odo has evolved.
Right.
And he is starting to see that when people love something, they are willing to do anything for it. I just think this is a social study to him and something he's learning from.
Uh-huh.
But the person asking the question doesn't get that because it's not Kira.
I didn't look at it that way.
I was all over this stuff in this episode. Because they're doing a very important thing to me. They are evolving the character of Odo, and they needed to do that to make me care about him, and they are doing it. So I was paying very close attention.
Odo also finds it difficult giving up things that he loves.
Yes.
He says specifically humanoids. It's like, I can apply these same things to you, Odo.
I agree when it comes to people, because Odo doesn't like change.
Yeah.
And I think that has been well established that he doesn't like change. Like when Kira was going to leave the station, he was freaking out. Remember back at the beginning of season 2, he was so upset about it.
Absolutely.
But I also think back then, he would not have understood why somebody like Miles would continue to inflict pain on himself, because he talked about him dislocating his shoulder a bunch of times, and keep going back and going through this kayaking thing again and again, because it's not a person to love. It's just a game. It's just a holosuite program. But I think he's evolved to the point where he's like, okay, I see. It's not just people. It's more than that. It's something inside themselves.
Right. Odo is starting to understand the reasons why humans are attached to these things.
Yes.
He's starting to understand the concept of struggle, even if it's not about your survival. It's about overcoming something that you enjoy doing.
Remember the conversation that we had back at the beginning of the episode about Meridian, where Odo and Kira are sitting and Kira's drinking a coffee, and they have this whole conversation about how he doesn't eat, he doesn't understand how to enjoy it. And you said the founders make this claim that they turn into something and they understand it.
Yes.
And it's just so egotistical of them to think that.
Yeah, they're just cosplaying.
Yeah, they're just cosplaying. This is another example of that, where Odo, living amongst the solids, has learned more about them than any of them who can turn into a Bajoran or turn into a human.
Yeah.
They're not learning about them and about their internal struggles and their internal lives. They're only learning what it means to look like them.
Right. It's very superficial.
Yeah. So that's an example of a layer that I picked up from this episode, that they're showing how much more he has learned by living with the solids.
Great take.
Then there's another earthquake and rocks start falling from the ceiling. Odo shifts into a protective wall around Kira to stop the rocks from hitting her.
Shifter.
She's worried it's taking too long to find the right frequency, but Odo is like, we've been in worse situations than this and came out all right. And she says, name 3. Odo looks at her very strangely, saying that wasn't the response he expected. In the detective novels Chief O'Brien gives him, when the hero says that line, his friends always agree. But she's like, well, I haven't read those books. She just wants to face the truth and go from there. He says in this case, the truth is, we're going to get you out of here.
Do you think that was another hint that maybe there's something off about Kira?
I think it definitely was, but I also don't think it's such a strange answer to say name 3 as a joke. But it wasn't a joke. She really was asking to name 3. So yeah, right. I do think it was a clue.
Because everything we've seen with Kira, her response would be, I've been in worse.
Absolutely. Like I said, in civil defense, they had 5 minutes before the ship was going to blow up.
Yeah.
She's the only one, right? She's just like totally calm.
And when she's told the stories of when she was a freedom fighter.
Right.
And she said, we ran out of batteries, we didn't have any food, and we're hiding for Cardassian patrols. And that was just one of her stories. It's like, how many more worse than that do you have?
There's that one point where she says, oh, please, a year ago I was living in a swamp. Right. It's like, it's always worse. Yeah. So yes, it was a clue, I think. Back at the station now, Dax and Sisko are totally shocked that Nog has done some impressive work in the cargo bay.
Yeah.
And also, nobody helped him, and he didn't steal anything, which Sisko asked.
Well, he asked in such a wonderfully subtle way.
Yes.
Which was, is all the equipment where it's supposed to be?
Yeah, exactly. She's like, yep, he didn't take anything. But Sisko says this really only proves that he's a hard worker. It doesn't answer the question of why he wants to join Starfleet. I will point out here that nobody's asked him why, except for Jake, but Sisko never asked him why. Maybe they cut that.
Or if it just comes back to Sisko's own biases about this situation.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Kira is now up to her neck in the crystal. Odo is frustrated because he's run through the entire harmonic spectrum and the crystal remains intact. Kira is now gasping for air, but he doesn't know what else to do. She asks him to tell her a story to distract her, and she asks how he got his name. He says, oh, that's an amusing story, and then he tells her that when he was first brought to Dr. Mora's lab, all samples had to be clearly labeled in Cardassian so that the overseers would always know what the scientists were working on. That was really depressing, that little point.
Yeah, Cardassians watching over your shoulder.
Nobody knew what he was, so he was labeled Unknown Sample, which translated into Cardassian was Odo Etal, which means the word nothing. The Bajoran scientists split it into 2 words like a Bajoran name and then eventually dropped the last part, so it just became Odo. He said when anyone would use his name, he would think of what the word meant, nothing. He had no family, no friends, no place where he belonged. He found it so appropriate.
Wow.
And then he met Kira and the others, Sisko, Dax, even Quark. And when he hears one of them call him Odo, he no longer thinks of himself as nothing.
Wow, does he ever have self-esteem issues?
Right.
That story wasn't amusing. It was awful.
It was tough. I was sad that he didn't mention Miles because it seemed like Miles was his friend now.
Yeah.
But this makes Kira start to cry because it is a sad story. And he apologizes, saying the story isn't as amusing as he thought.
No.
No, it's not.
But I would wonder as well about Odo rejecting that description of himself or that evaluation of what he was and give himself his own name.
Yeah, somewhere along the way, I guess he could have done that because in the beginning, when he wasn't able to communicate, it probably made no difference to him.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like he just got used to it and just accepted it, but it just meant nothing, literally, to him.
Right.
Until he didn't feel like nothing, which is just the saddest part of the story.
Yeah. I guess I don't understand the feeling or his lack of self-worth because it's something I can't really relate to. I guess it makes the story even worse that he would feel that about himself, certainly from my perspective.
Well, I think it's good that you don't know how that feels, and I don't know how that feels, but there are absolutely people who do know.
Yes.
Where they have just been made to feel like nothing by their surroundings rejecting them. And so I feel like this is a deeper story or a deeper idea that has certainly impacted people out in the real world.
Right.
And this is just a way of illuminating it, I guess, through an alien.
Yes.
But it's also important, again, for us to see that he's evolved. I really feel like this episode is all about how he's changed from the founders without their help.
Yeah.
Because if he had stayed with them, he would just be like one of them.
Well,
but instead, he's gone out in the world and he started off without any agency at all, which is why they did this in the opening scene.
Yeah.
And once he started to get control and then he started to meet people who made him feel like he had something, I guess, like he wasn't nothing anymore. He was actually someone with feelings who could make his own choices. And then there's also all that stuff in Abandoned, where he talks about he just wanted that kid to have choice.
Yeah, we're right.
And he didn't have choice, but now he does. So I just think this is all about Odo's evolution.
It's a great culmination of what we've seen since he met the founders. I've noticed this much more since in the rewatching, that Odo made a significant change at that point. And Odo becoming a more self-confident character just in the story arc. And I think this nicely reinforces that development that we've seen. I really appreciate that. Yeah,
I agree. Odo was almost fantasizing about who his people were.
Yeah.
Until he knew he felt lesser. And then once he knew and he realized he wasn't lesser, he was actually more than them. He was more open. He was more willing to give people a chance. He felt like the solids were equals with him. Once he realized that, I think he stopped having that feeling of being lesser and of accepting it, because I think it was very important that right after that moment, when he realized he was not lesser anymore, he got his own quarters.
Oh, yeah. Right. Another turning point.
Yeah, exactly. Just like you said, that was such an important moment in his evolution. We haven't seen all the ways that he's evolved since then.
Yeah.
But that has started this sort of domino effect of all these other things. And it's pretty cool.
And the other thing is the meeting with the founders, I think, validated his own personal code that nobody is better than anyone else.
Yeah.
His values are superior because they're more egalitarian.
Yeah. It's so interesting.
Yes.
It's stuff like this that makes me love Star Trek. This exact kind of development of a creature who's not even human.
Right.
It's just the coolest thing. Like all the stuff with Trill, that has been very cool to learn the stuff about the Trill.
Oh, absolutely.
There's still so much fertile ground that they could cover with that alien.
Yes.
And this is the same thing. This is just so cool.
Absolutely.
Well, now Kira says the ultrasonic generator isn't going to work, is it? He says no. And then she asks if he has any other ideas, and he doesn't. But he says something's not right. The generator really should have worked. She says he's done his best, and now he should go and save himself, but he's not going to leave. She tries giving him an order, but he refuses, even saying that he'll resign his commission.
Right.
No matter what, he's not going to abandon her. He starts getting very emotional when she keeps asking why, and eventually he reveals that he can't leave her because he's in love with her. I think we've known that for a very long time.
Yes.
He sort of collapses to the ground and then he sits back against the cave wall. It took a lot for him to admit that.
Yeah. So now you know, he says.
And she says, Odo, I'm in love with you too. And you know what went through my mind immediately when she said that?
What?
It's like the first Spider-Man movie where Mary Jane's been in love with him the whole time, even though she wasn't at the end of that movie. That just made me so mad. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I'm sure you remember that.
Yep. Oh, yes. I remember that conversation and the car on the way home.
Oy, that made me mad. But anyway, Odo is also surprised by this revelation.
Yes. He looks at very oddly.
Yeah, he's looking at her quite shocked.
Strangely enough,
yeah.
I remember when I watched this episode originally and she does the I love you bit of going, Bareil just died. What the hell is this?
I know. How can we just pretend like Bareil doesn't exist?
Yeah.
But why would this Kira know?
Yeah, it seemed so out of place.
Yep. I guess Bareil, out of sight, out of mind.
She gets over people quickly.
We go back into Sisko's office and Nog enters and Sisko tells him he's decided not to write his letter. He says Nog just isn't Academy material and he gives him his Latinum back. Sisko tells him he wouldn't last 2 weeks at the Academy and he's not going to put his reputation on the line for him. He keeps being very harsh, trying to get the true reason out of Nog for why he wants to be in Starfleet.
Once again, Avery is just nailing this.
This is a good scene. He tells him there's no profit in Starfleet and Nog says he doesn't care about profit. He finally admits that he doesn't want to end up like his father. He says his father has been chasing profit his whole life, and it hasn't gotten him anywhere. He says Ram is a mechanical genius who could have been a chief engineer on a starship if he'd had an opportunity. But he followed the idea of a good Ferengi and went into business. And all he has now is a slim chance to somehow inherit Quark's bar. Nog wants to do something with his life. He doesn't have an instinct for business, but he has his father's hands and his uncle's tenacity. He knows he has something to offer, but he needs a chance to prove it. Sisko, of course, after this speech, completely softens and agrees to give him the chance. Nog is so happy he hugs him, but Sisko tells him there's a lot of work ahead of him, and Nog shakes his hand again.
This is such a great scene. Avery is on fire.
He's very good in this scene. Yeah, I really liked it. And you could tell as soon as it started that he was like, I'm going to get this out of this kid.
Right. I think it showed the skills of Sisko as well, to be able to play the good cop, bad cop simultaneously, to get it out of Nog.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Now, in the scene, when Nog says that he doesn't have the lobes for business,
yep.
Do you think that Nog recognized that he was not a great businessman? Or do you think there was something more to it, like Nog didn't have the lack of morals, or the killer instinct, or just the ability to be an awful person? That seems to be required to work as a Ferengi.
Well, it's hard to know which one of those things it is. I guess I read it as he didn't really have a head for business and he wasn't really interested in it, is sort of the way that I read it. But you could also definitely look at the fact that Ram is a light touch. And, you know, there have been these hints all along the way that he's not always a great Ferengi.
Yeah.
Where he would chase after a pretty girl instead of trying to make profit from her. And there have been a couple of other things. But then there's also the one where he tried to kill Quark, right? So,
yes. Yeah.
It's entirely possible that if his father doesn't really have a head for business and isn't really focused on it, he's probably not pushing it as hard on his kid. And the only influence he's going to get about it is going to be from Quark. And Quark's not terribly likable most of the time.
Quark's also not really that good either.
He's not, that's what I was going to say, but he's not that good at it either. So I think it could be any of those things. It may be a combination of them. But what I was reading in this scene when he said doesn't have the lobes for it, I was reading it as he just doesn't have a head for business and doesn't really care. He's not that interested. And he doesn't want to be chasing after something that he's not that good at and doesn't care about.
That's how I saw it. It wasn't even necessarily that he wouldn't be good at business. He just didn't want to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Back in the cave, Odo is looking at the phaser marks on the wall behind Kira. She says she's sorry she waited so long to admit her feelings, but he's finally figured out what's going on. This whole situation has been suspicious from the beginning. He realizes she lied about being shot at and also about loving him. She says, I do love you. He says, I wish you did, but you don't.
Odo says he has observed her for the last 3 years and has had no indication of her having those kind of feelings for him.
Right.
A close friend, but love, I'm afraid not.
Yeah.
Odo is, again, just great here.
Oh, he's definitely very good here. He eventually points the phaser at her and says, tell me who you are and where is Kira?
Yes.
And then she kind of smiles and stands up and she shapeshifts into the Lady Changeling. That is a shocker.
It's the scary founder woman.
Yeah, apparently she is very good at shifting into people, unlike Odo.
I think this clearly shows that the appearance that she's making in front of Odo is entirely an aesthetic choice. She can do a perfect humanoid replica of Kira.
Yeah, and even voice.
So it must entirely be down to making Odo feel more comfortable.
I mean, it has to be. I'm not sure what other reason there would be. And she says that he's a skillful investigator, and he says she's a skillful changeling. I like that part. Like, good job.
I like that. There was a sort of odd mutual admiration there.
Yes. She admits that she's trying to understand why he elected to stay with the Solids instead of his own people, and now she realizes Kira is that reason. She figured letting Kira die would mean he'd return to his people. He assures her that nothing will ever make him do that. She says, don't be so sure.
Another thing I thought was telling here was how she said, I needed to understand.
Yep.
Not we, not the Great Link, not the Central Committee of the Founders. She said, I. Does this mean that she is in fact the leader or the controller of the Founders? Or am I implying disparity where there is none?
Is she the Borg Queen? I don't know. I wondered the same thing. I wondered if she was in charge. I also kind of randomly wondered if she was Odo's mother somehow. So I don't know. It seems like she's the leader. She seems to be the one who speaks for them all the time, but she would also be the one who did that if she was somehow his parent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who knows?
So maybe this was just an independent operation by her to get some understanding of what was happening. Okay.
Maybe. Well, Odo is still pointing the phaser at her, and he demands to know where Kira is. She reminds him that no changeling has ever harmed another changeling, but he continues to point the phaser at her and says, there's always a first time.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a biggie.
I got the feeling that actually worried her.
Oh, no, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
She didn't figure that into the plans, that Odo could actually shoot her.
She doesn't understand him at all.
Right.
Why would she?
I get the impression that Odo, to protect the things that he loves, or that he finds important, he would shoot her. There wouldn't be any question.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. She has no idea what she's gotten into with him, in the same way that he still doesn't know much about her or about all of the Founders. Yeah.
This might be my headcanon. I feel she doesn't understand the level of disgust that Odo feels about his own people's behavior.
Oh, no. She keeps thinking that he's going to wake up one day and go, oh, I got to get into that Great Link.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening too easily. Well, she gives in and tells him where Kira is, and she says, save her if it suits you, but it won't change anything. She'll never love you. How could she? You're a changeling. She is cold.
I think that beautifully portrays the absolute arrogance of what the Founders are.
Yeah. And by the way, it doesn't mean that somebody else wouldn't, just because Kira might not. I don't know.
Right.
She's just cruel. They're all cruel.
Yes. To quote Miles, they're cold-blooded.
They are cold-blooded. Well, she beams away, and then he runs off to find Kira and finds her in some kind of stasis chamber.
The Founders do like those stasis chambers.
Yes, they do. They're big fans of those. Well, we go back to the station now, and Kira is wondering why the Founder impersonated her to test his allegiance to the Solids. Odo lies and tells her it could have been anyone. She just happened to be the one in the shuttle that day.
Oh.
He also doesn't tell her what the Founder said that gave away her identity. So he keeps lying to her to hide his feelings. Aw, that's so sad.
It's probably a good idea at this point.
Yeah. Then we go to Quark's, and Quark says no nephew of his is going to disgrace the family by joining Starfleet. But Rom says Quark is not in charge of his son, and he tells Nog, good luck, and he would be proud to have a son in Starfleet. Very cute as Nog shakes his father's hand. Like father, like son, he says. The end.
I like that Rom actually stands up to Quark for Nog.
I did like that. Well, we have reached the end of the episode. I assume you have some overanalysis.
Oh, just one or two things.
Is this where the 11 pages starts with the overanalysis?
Yes, this is where the 11 pages start.
Oh my God.
That is correct. First one, if you're in that situation and you have super advanced medical science, cut off the foot and have the doctor fix it. That's my advice.
Okay.
Next thing, thinking practically about Nog. There is so much cultural baggage that they need to deal with there.
for him to get into Starfleet?
Well, not just for him to get into Starfleet, but for him to be able to interact with other Federation citizens, with other people in Starfleet.
Females.
I mean, just a week ago, he was calling the girls that they went on a date with stupid.
Good luck doing that to your female captain.
Yeah, Janeway would not take that well.
I wouldn't recommend it.
I think it's almost like this is too early. We haven't seen enough development in Nog.
Yeah, there's so much tolerance he has to learn. And even from the other side, the amount of tolerance that Starfleet is going to have to show to tolerate a Ferengi in their ranks as well. But they can't tolerate inequality.
Right.
So they're not going to humor his sexism. It's not going to be as funny to them. At least it better frickin' not be.
Well, you couldn't.
No, you couldn't. In fact, as one person, the only Ferengi in all of Starfleet, you'd get crushed if you tried to go in bringing in the Ferengi, bringing in their way of looking at women. You would get crushed, and should.
Right. On top of that, things like the bribery and the corruption that all form part of their society.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff like that.
There'd be so much for Nog to unlearn. The interesting thing is, I could see the Federation being able to deal with it. They would be in a better position to actually teach someone equality and egalitarianism.
Mm-hmm.
It would be the opposite side of Nog. Would he be able to accept those things? Would he be receptive of things that are fundamentally different from his society?
I mean, you're immediately going to have to listen to Kira and Jadzia.
Yeah. Talk about sea change. It's fascinating to think of. There would be so much.
This is a complicated thing that we could go into about a culture is what a culture is. And can you change it? And should you change it when they're joining the Federation?
Well,
I think what we've learned from Star Trek is that changing a culture as part of the Federation is not what would happen. But to me, Starfleet is a different thing because now it's your job. Now it's the workplace. Now you have to be equals. But if it's just something that happens on your planet, even though you're part of the Federation, would we do something about it? I don't know. I don't know enough about how that would work.
I mean, you almost have to. Otherwise, you would end up with massive disparities between the behavior of different races.
And exactly, because why, if you are from a different race and you saw that a planet that was part of the Federation, if the Ferengi became part of the Federation and you saw how badly the women were being treated, or if it was a racial issue within the Ferengi homeworld or whatever, how could you just stand by and accept that you were part of a greater thing of the Federation while that was going on, while there was such inequality? I think this is a real challenge and something that they don't face up to very often on Star Trek.
Well, I have a similar issue with the Trill. The way that the actual symbionts and the joined Trill treat the regular people, like I said, disposable assets. How is that morally acceptable to the Federation?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay, next thing.
Yeah.
The abusive relationship between the founders and Odo. It's like a story about narcissist parents. No one will love you like we love you.
Ugh.
I mean, seriously, the way the founders behave is awful.
Oh, it's terrible.
I feel it's like the ultimate conformist society.
To me, the truly sad thing here is that the changeling woman now did the same thing to Odo that the Bajoran scientist did. Treated him like a test subject who didn't matter.
Ooh, harsh.
At least the difference is she knows he's not an unfeeling pile of goo, and they didn't know that when they first found him. She knows he has feelings, and she just emotionally abused him. It was horrible.
That kind of leads on to my next point.
Yeah.
Is Odo actually different from the founders? Here's a theory. Odo, being sent out into space, was the equivalent of his DNA changed by stellar radiation, the Cardassian or Bajoran experiments, or even if he actually did go through the wormhole, which is why he ended up on this side of the galaxy, did the prophets change his DNA? So it's not that he's just behaving differently from the other founders. He's actually different. He's an evolutionary step above what the founders are today.
That's such a big question. It's certainly hard to know. I guess it's possible, but I kind of stand by the thing we talked about way back in the Search Part 2.
Yeah.
Which is that once he got out of this group of people, they're not really people, but the group of goo
people,
that we're never going to see anything different. We're never going to evolve and change. he was allowed to just sort of evolve naturally.
Yeah.
So the same thing might have happened to any one of them if they were put into that same situation. So nature versus nurture, I don't know. But it's an interesting question of, did something happen maybe even through the experiments or through exposure to certain chemicals in the other quadrant, right? Or
right.
different kinds of radiation that it could have turned him into something slightly different. Yes. I am not going to look at it that way. I'm going to choose to look at it like once he was exposed to this thing that's important to him, which is free will, and he was allowed to love who he wanted to love. He wasn't stuck in whatever the Great Link might have told him.
Yeah.
He just evolved naturally. That's the way I am choosing to look at it at this point.
Interesting. I don't know. I think it could be any of those things.
For sure.
But ultimately, he is an evolution of his race. And I think the problem is his race is stagnated.
100%. That's what we talked about in that episode.
Yeah.
They're never going to evolve. They're going to stagnate. If Odo never joins with them, they're never going to get any new ideas. They're stuck in what they're stuck in.
Right.
And because they never seem to die off, we don't know. At least I don't know at this point, do they actually age and then die and then new ones are born? Are there new generations? If so, it's going to take thousands of years for them to evolve. But if it's always just the same group and they're just in that pile of goo, they're never going to change.
That seems to be the thing that came up in the search, that Odo and the other ones that they said they sent out, it sounds like they don't actually make new changelings very often.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like your take on that. And I think my final point is, this episode really nicely encapsulates change. A Ferengi wanting to be more than what the Ferengi have been for centuries.
Yeah.
And his parents supporting it. And then on the opposite side, a changeling who has evolved beyond the other changelings, and they are desperate to stop it.
And their parents want him to be less.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. And that's really what they do in a lot of these episodes. They show the polar opposites in parallel.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're right. That is exactly what happened. One parent wanted to pull the child back, and one parent wanted to push the child into a new future. Yeah. Wow.
And that wraps it up for me.
Well, I had just a couple of things in my overanalysis section. We already talked about one with the emotional abuse thing.
Yeah.
The other thing I had is that I was so disappointed in Kira's treatment of Odo at the beginning when they're in the shuttle.
Yeah.
And so I started to wonder if maybe that wasn't Kira already. Maybe the loony woman replaced her on the Bajor colony.
Oh my gosh, that's a really good take. That could totally be possible. This whole thing was evaluating why Odo behaved the way he did.
It would explain why she didn't mention Barial, and also why she didn't give him any right to make his own decisions or whatever, because she was already testing him.
That would explain the arrogance and the non-apology.
Yes. And it certainly could have been, because it also happened very quickly when they got down to the planet. The entire thing may have been part of the ruse.
Wow. The other thing we can see in this episode is how well a good, experienced shapeshifter can replicate a humanoid form.
I have to say, that's very scary. If they can just look like anyone. And you did say something like that to me somewhere along the way when I said, yeah, but they don't really look like humans. And you're like, as far as you know. I went, oh.
Minor spoiler, sorry.
Yeah. I didn't expect that to be the changeling woman, but I knew it wasn't Kira. When she started crying, when she still had 12 hours left, I'm like, there is no way that's Kira. I think the other thing in my overanalysis that you didn't bring up is, why did she know some things but not other as Kira? Where did she get this information? Like, how did she know about Dr. Bashir? And, but she didn't know, or she didn't seem to know about Barial. Where did the information come from that she was using in her ruse?
Interesting.
Because she was not part of that experiment that they did at the beginning of the year. So they didn't have her hooked up to the machines and downloading her brain or whatever they did with the others.
Yeah. Maybe they do have somebody on the station just observing.
But it's also possible that she's been Kira for a while.
Maybe for this whole mission, Kira was actually in the stasis chamber.
Exactly. That's all my overanalysis points. So I'll just go to women in the future.
Okay.
There's not really a ton to say because it wasn't really Kira. I think it would have probably had a lot to say if it really was Kira, if she wasn't caring about Odo enough. Also, back at the station, Dax was just doing her job, so, not much to say about that. Though what she was doing seemed like it should have been Miles's job. Like, why would she be the one as the science officer telling Nog to go and do a inventory. I would think that would have been Miles.
Miles has got like 3,000 other things to do.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's a small crew and you just kind of do what you have to do.
Yeah.
So that's really all that I have in Women in the Future. So I think I will move on to rating. So thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. Loved the episode. In some ways, the episode loses something because you know the hook. But it's an episode that I remember my reactions to this when I watched it the first time.
Yeah.
Because I literally did not get it wasn't Kira until the reveal. So although you lose the hook, you still get a great episode in rewatches. And the whole thing with Nog is just fascinating.
Yeah. It's a thumbs up for me, too. I really loved this episode.
Yeah.
And I also like the B story, just like you were saying with Nog. It was meaningful and not some throwaway garbage where somebody, usually a woman, gets kind of betrayed or stomped on or whatever. And I never appreciate stuff like that. But I've also never really appreciated Nog before until this episode. But they're finally starting to make him a little bit more interesting and give him some control over his own life. And he doesn't have to be that same stereotype of a Ferengi.
Right.
He can make some of his own decisions. And it was very Starfleet of Sisko to give him a chance, to try him out and then agree to give him the chance.
Absolutely.
And just like you were saying there about Rom, I was really proud of him at the end, you know, where he didn't let Quark just squash everyone's dreams. Instead, he stood up for Nog, and I thought that was great. But the best thing about this episode was what we learned about Odo. And I loved that whole story about his name meaning nothing and how that changed him. And I like how we are seeing him evolve, even though I'm not 100% sure about that opening scene. If that was Kira, we saw her devolve a little bit, which is frustrating. So in my head canon, that whole thing is just going to be the changeling and not Kira. That'll make me feel better.
I'm going with you there. I think that is a great explanation for what happened in that scene.
The stories that really make me feel something, and I teared up a little bit towards the end of this, those are the ones I love about Star Trek. When I first watched The Next Generation and I got to the episode where Tasha dies, you know, in the very first season, I remember watching that and just crying my eyes out, and I was completely hooked from there. I'm like, okay, Star Trek,
Right.
You got my heart. Okay. You know, you made me cry. You stupid show. I'm just going to keep watching you. And then it got better from there. Season 1 is not that great, but it certainly got better from there. So anytime I can get some real emotion from a show, I'm going to appreciate it. And this was really good. I like this episode a lot.
Great acting as well.
Very good. Agreed. Even from Nog.
This, I think, is the first time we've really seen Nog being able to play a part.
Oh, yeah. He was just annoying before. And they're trying to give him some choices that he can make on his own. And they've made no mention of that before. Like, even when he was calling those girls stupid and whatever, they didn't talk to him about, hey, you want to get along with other races? You better friggin' learn how to talk to people. You know, nobody said anything to him. Well, he's going to get some lessons now.
Right.
But also the fact that he was seeing that he didn't like how his own father lived and what it did to him.
Yeah.
So if he's really going to make a decision to move away from that, then he's got to evolve, or he's just going to be sucked right back into that world.
And I think that's perhaps the most interesting part, that he can't be unaware of what this entails.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And I never picked this up before, but I love your point that if you look back, there is this odd reverence for Sisko.
Yeah, definitely.
I can relate to that.
That's true. You and Nog have a lot in common in that way. You're idolizing of Sisko. But also, I think with Nog, there were many times where he just looked at him as a good dad to Jake, and he wished he'd had that. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of Season 3, Episode 14. Come back next week for Episode 15. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.